নমস্কার। আমার সঙ্গে এই মুহূর্তে আমরা রয়েছি ইনস্টিটিউট অফ ডেভেলপমেন্ট স্টাডিজ কলকাতায়, একটি গবেষণা প্রতিষ্ঠান, সামাজিক অর্থনৈতিক গবেষণা প্রতিষ্ঠান। এবং আমাদের সৌভাগ্য যে আমরা পেন স্টেট ইউনিভার্সিটি, মার্কিন যুক্তরাষ্ট্রের পেন স্টেট ইউনিভার্সিটির মেরিকে আমরা পেয়েছি, যিনি দীর্ঘদিন জনসংখ্যা, জনসংখ্যা এবং জনবিন্যাসের সঙ্গে সমাজের বিভিন্ন যে অন্যান্য বিষয় তার সম্পর্ক নিয়ে কাজ করছেন। এবং সাম্প্রতিককালে উনি কিন্তু পশ্চিমবঙ্গের জনসংখ্যা, জনবিন্যাস, ধর্মবোধ এরকম নানা বিষয় নিয়ে গবেষণা করছেন। এই পশ্চিমবঙ্গে প্রাইমারি ডেটা মানে হচ্ছে একদম গবেষণা ডেটা উনি তুলছেন। এবং এর আগে উনি বাংলাদেশেও কাজ করেছেন এবং বিশ্বের নানা জায়গায় কাজ করেছেন। উনি ফুলব্রাইট ফেলো অর্থাৎ মার্কিন যুক্তরাষ্ট্র থেকে উনি বৃত্তি পেয়েছেন এই এই বারবার গবেষণা করতে আসার জন্য। তো আমরা সাধারণত যেটা আমরা সুযোগ করে দিতে চাই যে আমরা এই বাংলার মানুষ যেন গবেষণা লব্ধ তথ্য এবং সত্যর ভিত্তিতে আমরা কি কি জানি এবং বিশ্বের শ্রেষ্ঠ গবেষণা প্রতিষ্ঠানগুলো, গবেষকরা এই বিষয়গুলো তার তথ্য উপাত্ত দেখে কি বার করছেন এটা আমাদের জানা দরকার। আমাদের স্পষ্ট কথা আপডেট থাকা দরকার, স্ট্যাটিস্টিক্যালি, সংখ্যাতাত্ত্বিকভাবে, তথ্যগতভাবে ইত্যাদি। তো উনি একটু বাংলাও বোঝেন, যার ফলে she understood largely what I said. আমি ওনার সাথে মূলত ইংরেজিতেই কথা বলবো। উনি আমাকে জানিয়ে দিয়েছেন যে উনি বাংলা বুঝতে পারেন, একটু বলতে পারেন, কিন্তু এটা দীর্ঘ আলোচনা চালিয়ে যাওয়ার মতো স্বচ্ছন্দ নন। So Mary, so the way this will go is I will our conversation, especially the questions, I will put it in Bangla for the aid of our audience, and then in English. But first things first, and I think you will understand this in Bangla. তুমি কোথায় জন্মেছো? তুমি কে? তুমি কোথায় জন্মেছো এবং তোমার বড় হয়ে ওঠা কোথায়? কোথায় তুমি কলেজ ইউনিভার্সিটিতে গেছো? পিএইচডি কোথায় করেছো? কি নিয়ে করেছো পিএইচডি?
So you want to know the basics of my
bio? Who are you?
Should I speak to you or them?
You speak to them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hi. Hello everyone. I'm Mary Schenk. I'm an Associate Professor of Anthropology, Demography, and Asian Studies from Pennsylvania State University. I did my PhD in the US from the University of Washington in 2005 in anthropology, but I was born in the US and brought up there. I was born in Kansas and raised in Louisiana by my parents, and now I'm teaching in the state of Pennsylvania.
Okay. So, পেনসিলভেনিয়ায় পড়াচ্ছেন, তার আগে ক্যান্সাসে ছিলেন, লুইজিয়ানায় ছিলেন। তো পশ্চিমবঙ্গে মানে আপনি কি নিয়ে গবেষণা করতেন পিএইচডির সময়? হোয়াট ওয়ার ইউ ওয়ার্কিং অন ডিউরিং ইউর পিএইচডি? এবং তারপর থেকে আপনার গবেষণার থিমগুলো, গবেষণার বিষয়গুলো কি কি থেকেছে? সো হোয়াট ওয়াজ ইউর পিএইচডি অন অ্যান্ড হোয়াট হ্যাভ বিন ইউর research themes since then?
So my PhD was focused on the economics of marriage, and it was I did my dissertation research in Bangalore, now Bengaluru, in South India. And after that, I shifted to focusing on fertility and sort of family size, and I started working in Bangladesh. So I've been working in Matlab, Bangladesh since 2007, so 15 years. And then recently I have been coming also to work in West Bengal. And I'm interested in fertility and economic development and also things related to religiosity and
right.
Outcomes. Yeah.
Right. অর্থাৎ উনি পরের দিকে এই মুহূর্তে যখন গবেষণা করছেন, উনি কাজ করছেন হচ্ছে ফার্টিলিটি, অর্থাৎ উর্বরতা, কত সন্তান প্রজনন ক্ষমতা বা যাই বলুন, তার সঙ্গে ইকোনমিক ডেভেলপমেন্ট অর্থাৎ অর্থনৈতিক উন্নয়ন, রিলিজিওসিটি অর্থাৎ ধর্মবোধ, কতটা ধর্মানুরাগী বা মানে ধর্মীয় ব্যাপারের সঙ্গে কতটা যুক্ত, এরকম নানা বিষয় নিয়ে উনি কাজ করছেন। তো if we come to West Bengal, where we are sitting right now, what do our West Bengal's TFR say, and why do you do it? please explain what is TFR and what is replacement rate and stuff like that. প্রশ্ন আমি যেটা করলাম যে আমরা এই মধ্যে পশ্চিমবঙ্গে বসে রয়েছি, তো এই যে টোটাল ফার্টিলিটি রেট TFR অর্থাৎ নারী প্রতি যে শিশুর যে জন্মহার মোটামুটি, ঠিক আছে, মানে সেই বাস্তবতাটা কি বলে, এটা কি জানায় আমাদের, এবং রিপ্লেসমেন্ট রেট বলে একখানা ধারণা এর ক্ষেত্রে গুরুত্বপূর্ণ, সেটাই বাকি।
So TFR is the total fertility rate, and it is the average number of children a woman would have if she had the rate of fertility that all the women in this year will have, right? So it's a little bit complicated to calculate. You get the age-specific rates for women of each age, and you add them together. But it gives you a very good number, which is the average number of children that women are having now in the community. And so it's one of the most commonly used statistics that we use when focusing on fertility when we're looking in different parts of the world. So that's the main thing that I study. I have never actually studied replacement rate.
Okay. And just for people to understand, মানুষের বোঝার জন্য, রিপ্লেসমেন্ট রেট হচ্ছে সেই বিষয়টা যখন ধরুন আপনার জনসংখ্যা যা রয়েছে, আপনার এই যে TFR যেটা এক্ষুনি বলা হলো, সেটা কত থাকলে জনসংখ্যা আসলে বাড়বেও না কমবেও না, ঠিক আছে, মানে যত মানুষ মারা যাচ্ছে এবং যত মানুষ জন্ম নিচ্ছে, এটা তো আসলে এক জায়গায় হয়ে গেলে তো আসলে মানুষ এই রকম একটা TFR এর মাধ্যমে তখন তো জনসংখ্যাটা বাড়বে না কমবে না, যত মানুষ আছে তত মানুষ হচ্ছে, এরকম একটা স্থিতাবস্থা। এই যে TFR এ এই স্থিতাবস্থা, সেইটাকে সাধারণত রিপ্লেসমেন্ট রেট বলা হয়। রিপ্লেসমেন্ট রেট হচ্ছে 2.1, সাধারণত অধিকাংশ মানে যে পপুলেশনগুলো স্টাডি করা হয় সারা বিশ্বে। 2.1 is typically the replacement.
Right, is exactly right. Sorry, yeah. 2.1 is typically thought of as replacement rate because.
And what does that mean? A replacement rate of 2.1.
A replacement rate of 2.1 means that that population won't grow and it won't shrink. So if you have 2.1, it is the number that you get. If you keep having that number, your population will stay the same size.
So if we kind of say in layman's terms, of course, lots of things are particulars and they might change these things. So if a population has a TFR of 2.1 for an extended period of time, the idea is that they will be stable at numbers.
They will be stable at that number, assuming there's not too much migration out or in,
Right,
or
right.
migration out and in is the same.
Exactly.
So for fertility, will be balanced by mortality. That's the idea with 2.1, because having 2 children per woman will replace the woman and her husband, so that is the 2. So that will stay the same. And then 0.1 is because some people may not have children or they may die before they're able to. And so 2.1 is usually seen as something that will give us a long-term no
Right.
population growth
Right.
and no population shrinking also.
Right. Which is this behind when some people talk about two-child policy? Is that what they are trying to aim at when people all over the world, especially in the developing world, this two-child policy has often been touted in population control programs?
Yeah, two-child policy is usually meant to get the population to a replacement rate. To keep it from growing so quickly, and to keep it so that the population remains around the same. That's the idea. To get it to the point where it's more stable.
Right. So a two-child policy is typically for populations then which are growing at TFR is more than 2, right?
Yeah. Usually, you're right. You use the two-child policy if the growth rate is more than 2. So 2A4 is more than 2.1.
What is more than 2.1?
So it could be 2.2, but mostly 2.5, 3, 3.5.
That's when you talk about.
That's what higher fertility would mean higher population growth over time. The population is growing faster, and because of that, usually the two-child policies have been, used in those kind of contexts. Whereas in some parts of the world, fertility rates are actually low, much lower than 2.1 now. And in those kinds of cases, they don't have a two-child policy. Some groups would like them to have a two-child policy to to increase fertility.
Okay, so now it works in a
Now you see
reverse.
this in Eastern Europe and places like this where fertility has gone down. Some governments have tried to increase the fertility.
Two-child policy.
Two-child policy to increase, exactly, increase.
So in a way it becomes from not more than 2 to at least 2.
Exactly.
Okay.
You have seen these differences.
Right. So in all of this, we've been to Eastern Europe and Bangladesh and various places. What about West Bengal? Where do we stand in terms of TFR and this whole issue?
Yeah, West Bengal is actually very interesting, and this is one of the reasons for my project and my collaboration here with my colleagues at GargaChatterjee Institute for Development Studies, Kolkata, is that West Bengal has a very low fertility rate for a place, a community or a state in the developing world where lots of places. So it is actually maybe around 2000, fertility rate was 3 children per woman or slightly higher, and now it has come down to 1.6 children per woman or even 1.5 children per woman now in West Bengal. So it's quite low. You see this it looks more similar to a lot of European countries.
Like what?
For example, I think Belgium, I think, and Netherlands and places like this, or even actually maybe lower than some of those. Yeah.
Okay, maybe Scandinavian countries. So in a way, West Bengal's TFR is at par with countries with socio-economic attainments very different or much higher.
This is the idea, right? So the typical development index of some of those countries would be seen as much higher, but total fertility rate is quite similar.
And that's what makes West Bengal interesting, because
It
obviously its economic situation is not like northern Western Europe, right? But it's one of those indicators which go with such numbers. West Bengal sticks out.
So the fertility rate is actually coming down here faster than we would expect. It's lower than we would expect oftentimes.
I see. So when we talk about a TFR of 1.6 in West Bengal, of course, West Bengal is not only just not a, there are fractionations within West Bengal, right? So what about TFR among Hindus, TFR among Muslims, right? How do they pan out?
So TFR is lower among Hindus than among Muslims. You see this in many parts of South Asia, including Bangladesh, where I work. But what you really notice, especially in these rates, is that Hindu fertility has decreased in the past, and now Muslim fertility is decreasing very, very quickly. And so they're now getting closer and closer over time.
So particularly in West Bengal's case, where do the Hindu and Muslim TFRs stand?
Yeah, so Hindu TFR is around 1.5, maybe slightly lower, and Muslim TFR is about 2. So both, just about 2. So both are below replacement, but one is lower than the other. But the Hindu TFR is decreasing slowly, and the Muslim TFR is decreasing a bit faster than that.
So if I put a formulation, just correct me if this is right or wrong, yeah? So if we just look at a times point snapshot, আমি যে প্রশ্নটা করতে যাচ্ছি এটা খুব গুরুত্বপূর্ণ, একটু শোনার চেষ্টা করবেন। আমি প্রথমে বাংলায় বলবো, তারপরে ওনাকে ইংরেজিতে জিজ্ঞেস করবো যে আজকে টিএফআর, যেটাকে মোটামুটি ভোঁদাভাবে যদি নারী প্রতি জন্মহার বলি আমরা, সন্তান সংখ্যা, সেটা আজকে পশ্চিমবঙ্গে হিন্দু এবং মুসলমান যে জায়গায় দাঁড়িয়ে রয়েছে, মুসলমানের বেশি 2 গড়ে, হিন্দুদের মুসলমানের থেকে কম, পশ্চিমবঙ্গে 1.5 গড়ে মোটামুটি, এটা উনি বললেন একটু আগে। এবার তিনি তার সঙ্গে এটা হচ্ছে, অর্থাৎ এইটাই যদি থাকে 2, 1.5, ঠিক আছে, তাহলে আস্তে আস্তে জনসংখ্যায় যেটা হবে, যেটা নিয়ে অনেক কথাও হয় যে এক সময় মুসলমান হিন্দুর থেকে বেশি হয়ে যাবে, যেটা আলোচিত হয় নানা রকম, যাও এটা একটা ধারণা। কিন্তু উনি তারপরে আরেকটা কথা বললেন যে বাংলায়, পশ্চিমবঙ্গে মুসলমান সম্প্রদায় যেভাবে কমছে, যতটা তাড়াতাড়ি কমছে, হিন্দুদের তার থেকে কম তাড়াতাড়ি কমছে। বেশি কমে আছে, কথাটা বোঝার চেষ্টা করুন, হিন্দুদের কমে আছে বেশি, কিন্তু কমছে কম তাড়াতাড়ি। মুসলমানদের হিন্দুদের থেকে আরেকটু বেশি, যে বেশিটা খুবই কম, ঠিক আছে, কিন্তু সেটা কমছে খুব তাড়াতাড়ি। এবং আমি যে প্রশ্নটা করতে চাই যে যদি এটা খুব কমে বেশি তাড়াতাড়ি আর এটা কমে কম তাড়াতাড়ি, হিন্দুদের যদি কমে কম তাড়াতাড়ি, হিন্দুদের মুসলমান যদি কমে বেশি তাড়াতাড়ি, তাহলে এই যে এক সময় বেশি হয়ে যাবে, এই কথাটার মানেটা কি, আমরা এটাই জানার চেষ্টা করব। সো নাও টু এক্সপ্লেন, শি গট মোস্ট অফ ইট আই থিঙ্ক। সো what I tried to explain in Bangla is in West Bengal, as Professor Singh just said, Professor Mary just said, is Hindus in Bengal have a TFR of around 1.5. Muslims in Bengal have a TFR of around 2, both of which are under replacement, which is 2.1. And so if these were static numbers, then one could expect that this gap would maybe eventually in some time do a crossover so that there would be higher proportion of Muslims than Hindus. But there is another factor which you talked about, is that the rate of decrease of TFR, how this is coming down, that Hindus were not always 1.5, they were 3 at some point of time, while Muslims were not always 2, they were something else, 3.5 or 4 at one point of time. The way they are coming in are different at this point of time, right? That's what you're saying, in the sense that Muslims are coming down faster than Hindus are coming
So
down.
we would expect from especially what my colleagues have calculated, etc., that we think maybe in around 10 years they look like they will be the same at this point.
So in 10 years, if Hindu and Muslim population is 10 years or 15 years, whatever,
The rates
will be basically identical within error. So, which means that there will not be any shift over. That's what
very
this
unlikely
means.
you could get a shift over. No, yeah, that's not
So you said very unlikely you could get a shift ever. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
অর্থাৎ তুমি যেটা বললেন যে খুবই কম সম্ভাবনা যে কখনোই পশ্চিমবঙ্গে হিন্দু সংখ্যাগরিষ্ঠতাটা মুসলমান সংখ্যাগরিষ্ঠতায় পরিণত হবে। উনি যেটা বললেন তার বাংলা মানেটা এই দাঁড়ায়। What do you think attributes to, so if we are looking at Muslims at 2 and Hindus at 1.5, I would not give a value judgment in terms of what's wrong with us, okay, something like that. But what do you think is going on?
So there are two main things that most of the literature around the world, including the literature from this region, suggests is probably going on. And one of them is economic differences between groups and economic and educational differences between
No,
groups.
that's not what I was talking
Okay.
about. The fact that both of these are under replacement, not the difference between 1.5 and 2.
Okay, got it.
You know, so
Okay.
why this Scandinavian one parameter in the middle of South Asia? That's what we are talking about.
So I'll still answer. The answer is probably partially similar,
Right,
though, actually.
yeah, tell me.
So most of the people who've studied fertility transition or fertility reduction in the world, one of the major drivers is women's education, and another major driver is basically the economic changeover from an agricultural economy to an education-based economy. And then the third one is sort of diffusion of ideas about low fertility from urban areas and more educated, wealthier groups to other groups outside.
Opinion-forming groups.
Opinion-forming groups.
Hegemonic groups in a way.
So in West Bengal, I think you're seeing all of these things mixing together. You're having increasingly high rates of education in the past, but also increasingly in rural areas, etc., including for women. You're having this economic shift is going on, and you also have this
urbanization
shift, and you have very old patterns of fertility reduction among educated people in places like Kolkata, which have influenced the other parts of the region. Although some of my colleagues are also finding that in rural West Bengal, you especially see a focus on parents increasingly feeling like they really strongly want to invest in their children as much as they can, especially their children's education and their children's job prospects as much as they possibly can. And so even if they are themselves are very poor, that means they'll just have one child or two children and invest a lot in those things. And this we see actually very commonly across almost everyone. If you interview people in rural West Bengal, we see similar things in Bangladesh also.
In terms of focus on children's education.
Children's
বড় করতে হবে,
education,
হ্যাঁ।
exactly. They say, yeah, they basically focus on children's education, focus on getting the children into a good job, focus on getting the child a good marriage, and focusing on having that child's prospects be good, being able to feed them well, give them new clothes, have them to have a good life. And ideally, people want their children to have a better life than they have.
Wouldn't that be a universal?
It is a universal in that sense. You see this everywhere, and you see this idea increasing almost everywhere in the world where you see fertility going down. But it seems especially strong in this region.
Particularly, what's the particular? When you mean region, you mean West Bengal? Or?
I mean all of Bengal. This is where I've been working in Bangladesh and now West Bengal. And so in this whole region, you see this kind of idea, especially. But this very strong sense of responsibility for one's children and needing is especially stronger in West Bengal. But we see very similar kinds of things also in Bangladesh as well.
In West Bengal, when you are looking at these sort of, if one call them cultures or ideologies or idea diffusions, do you see any differences in terms of responses between Hindus and Muslims vis-a-vis these parameters?
For these parameters, almost no difference, honestly. Almost everyone says almost exactly the same thing, which is this, everyone wants to see this really strong focus on the education and prospects of their children. That we don't see very much difference by religious group.
You did field study, right?
We did field
study.
study.
You did field study in the district of Birbhum, which is more than 30% Muslim minority district. Did you come across instantiations, significant instantiations to say that people justifying that large populations or large litters would be great for the community and stuff like that?
No one says this. No one says this.
Okay.
Everyone you talk to basically, most people are having one or two children. Almost everyone is having one or two children across religions. A few people have three, but not very many. And anyone with very large numbers of children, they are older people who have those in the past, 20 years back, not now. You almost never see it now.
Then what do you attribute statements like Muslims are having 5 to 10 children and hence are soon will inundate Hindus in West Bengal? What do you make out of a statement like
then
that?
They're not really focusing on the data from West Bengal is what I would say, because whether it's our study or a National Family Health Survey study, this is very clearly not true. When you do any studies of this region, you don't see this.
So if I would summarize it, it's a perception rather than a reality.
It's a perception rather than a reality. Very few people at all from any background have that many children, and very few Muslims are having that many children.
Okay. And another issue, if this is the reality of West Bengal, then since you have studied, done research in Bangladesh, in the field, aren't so many Muslims from Bangladesh itching to get into India?
So I don't study migration into India, but I will say that I've done a lot of work on labor migration in Bangladesh. In Bangladesh, a lot of families where I'm working in Matla, about 30% of the families have a husband or brother or someone living outside, doing work outside. And what we see is the vast majority of those people who have gone outside have gone to the Gulf or to Malaysia, Singapore, sometimes to Europe. Very few have gone to India. So most of the people have gone elsewhere, rather than coming to India. And the people who we have interviewed who came to India or their family came to India, in many of those cases they were Hindus who were interested in coming to India because they had family in India.
Okay. So, destination of choice seems to be Middle East and better income bracket countries.
Really, the main focus seems to be that people want to earn as much as possible, and so if they have the opportunity, they'll go to Dubai, Riyadh, to Abu Dhabi, they'll go to Malaysia, Singapore, these kinds of places are the main things. Sometimes people go to Italy, Australia, other places.
It must be very perilous, right? I mean, it's not an easy journey.
Yeah.
So in a way, let's say perception of Muslims from Bangladesh inundating West Bengal in hordes is, can we call it absurd in this time and age?
I certainly have not seen any evidence of it myself. In the statistics or in the data that I've collected, I have not seen any.
So, shifting gears, I'm not talking about Bangladesh right now, but just for the geolocation, it's very close, and especially in terms of global warming, these are very big hotspots. So, as you see you also have studied religiosity, right?
Yes.
And religiosity and fertility, right? So, explain. You were saying something about you see this across religions, that greater religiosity.
One thing, yeah, you see in the literature from around the world that people who are more religious or practicing their religion more often have more children. You often see this. And the question we're trying to understand is, why is that true? So we have some research that we're doing in this region and also in different parts of the world, in Birbhum, in Bangladesh and in Africa, and also in the US.
So what are your centers? Which are your centers? It's a multi-centric study.
Yeah, exactly. So in West Bengal, so in Birbhum, in Bangladesh, in Matlabazar, in Malawi,
okay,
in the Gambia, these are both in Africa, and also in Pittsburgh, which is a city in the US that is near my home university.
Okay. So, so if with such a spread, I'm sure you have multiple religious communities,
Many
right?
religious communities.
So when we talk about religiosity, it's also that many religions. So when you say these many religions, what is common among the religiosity of these religions?
One thing
varied religions, but
yeah, exactly.
what is common?
What we see, one thing that we see so far in the analyses we're doing is that the public practice of religion, or anything kind of very strong public practicing, going to the masjid, going to the mandir, being involved in prayer groups or other kinds of things, it could be church, etc. What you see is the public practice seems to be associated with having more children. On average, though the difference could be small, right? The difference could be called like 0.1 child or 0.2 child.
Oh, so that
small.
Small.
That's small. Yeah. So this is
because
a
I
statistical effect.
Yeah. I see. Because I am wondering. Let's say if you take the case of West Bengal, Hindus are 1.5 and average, and many Hindus are religious. Muslims are 2. Many Muslims are religious. So I wonder what their differences are, given their base rates are so low, right?
So mostly in this religiosity analysis, what we're comparing is Hindus to Hindus, or Muslims to Muslims, or Christians to Christians, right? That's mainly what we're comparing. And what we're
so let's say for less religious Muslims, how low can it get? Or, that's what I'm thinking. Or for less religious Hindus, how low can it get?
So what we see is that some of the other variables like education and occupation and whether you live in city or village or something, these things are very important. They're important around the world, and they are the very strong predictors. But if you look at the religiosity variables, what we see is differences suggesting that it is reducing the chances by 0.1, 0.2 children, which seems like very small, and it's not so big, but it's not so low also, because people are only having 1 or 2 children.
Exactly.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, it it can be a really small effect in some variables, and then it can be a little bit larger effect in some cases. We see this kind of thing.
So,
but comparing usually within religions, you see this.
let me ask a question which might seem, I mean, take it as you will. Do Muslims in West Bengal need population control as the data stands today?
I do not think so, personally.
Why not?
Because they are under replacement fertility.
Which means that they are producing more than they are dying?
Less than
they are dying. So, okay.
And also because the
Hindus
fertility rate is coming down, so the population is becoming lower and lower. So I don't think any changes need to be made in that.
So do Hindus need population control in West Bengal?
No.
Do Hindus and Muslims need to get to 2 at least, or stay there if that were a societal goal?
So many places in the world are facing this situation.
And how have they solved this? That's actually what I want to know. Yeah.
So many places in the world have gone under 2 now. This is a new phenomenon in India. It's only happened in the last couple of decades. It happened in Kolkata, honestly. In Kolkata, it's been there for a long time. But in many parts of India, this is a recent phenomenon.
When you say many parts, which parts are you talking about?
South India mainly, and West Bengal, primarily the places.
So
Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Karnataka, these places are a bit under 2 also.
Right.
And so in those but you also see this, many places in Europe have had this kind of under 2 fertility rate for several decades. You also see very, very low fertility rates in Japan, in South Korea, in Singapore, in Hong Kong, in places like this. So many parts of the world are facing this. And there's usually different ways that people are dealing with it. One way is to kind of restructure the institutions slowly so that the population can become lower, kind of peacefully, so to speak. And the other thing is you see immigration as a solution to this to this, because you need people working at younger ages.
But with the recent backlash and replacement theory type of things coming up, isn't that line of solution in peril, or in a part of is being debated?
That kind of thing is being debated.
That immigration being a solution to or in short, calling younger people in to kind of push up a more aging population with low TFR. That's what we're talking about, right? And we have seen that has given rise to huge tensions in large parts of Europe and
in US also.
In the US also. And in India, for example, we have heard chief ministers of the southern states, somebody like, let's say, Chandrababu Naidu, who used to rule Andhra Pradesh, Hyderabad as the capital, talking about TFRs, in the same similar context as we are. So, of course, with the sort of semi-demonization of they are, north, Hindi-speaking north producing, which is borne out by data, but a certain demonization added to it. But that's a different issue. For, let's say, a sovereign state, let's say, any sovereign, Japan, an island, a sovereign state, can restructure institutions, right? We won't let anyone in. We will make our societies or things kind of reorient to our reality, okay? And then there are, let's say, multi-ethnic unions like federal unions like India, where these ethnic units are, let's say, West Bengal, let's say, Punjab, let's say, Tamil Nadu. These are not sovereign units. So, can't just reorient, can't just stop entry of population, right? So what happens in these scenarios? Does the world know how these, or are we at the cusp of a unique situation?
I think that the world is still working out these kind of situations, honestly, everywhere, because because population decline is happening in lots of places and it's being worked out by different countries in different ways. And I don't honestly study that, so I don't have a lot of strong opinions on it. But I do think there are, one thing is there are different ways to deal with it. And then the other thing I think that I would want people to keep in mind as a fertility researcher is that even in those groups where fertility is higher now, fertility is going down almost everywhere. So if fertility is a little bit higher in one state now, it probably won't be for very long. So that is also changing. Everywhere that's changing. And so I think this is kind of, there may be sort of short aspects of this that are short-term rather than long-term. Population decline may be long-term, but different balances in different places may not last for a long time.
So there is no population explosion in West Bengal at this point.
I see no evidence of population explosion in West Bengal.
You're the expert.
Yeah.
So there is no explosion of Muslim population in West Bengal.
The data does not show that, no.
Is there a explosive entry and propagation of Muslim Bangladeshis into West Bengal?
I don't see evidence of that. Some people may be crossing the border, but not in very large numbers. And many of them are, lots of Hindus also come to West Bengal.
Okay. So thank you, Mary. And we will come back once you're completely done
Okay.
with the primary research and have digested, because we would also want to know where we and the world stand vis-a-vis each other. It's a 5-center study,
Yeah.
so I'm sure that would be extremely fascinating.
Yes, me in 1 or 2 years we'll have some more data from different sites, including from India.
Okay, thank you. Namaskar.
Okay.